Hello, everybody. Welcome to the TechRaptor podcast. I'm Robert Scarpanito, your features editor.
Andrew Hutton, editor-in-chief.
Andrew Stretch, hurricane editor. Why not?
Yeah, how are things going, Stretch?
You're in control of them? Like, is it you can change things and you choose not
That's
to?
what I meant.
Well, that's what an editor is. That's pretty fucked up, actually. You like try to save some.
No, it's not in the way that I edit it. It's that, like an editor, I get handed messes and then I need to edit those. So I got handed a hurricane this week.
Oh, so you're Ron DeSantis.
God, how dare that is the rudest thing you have
I went too far.
Yeah, of all the things you've ever called or said about Stretch.
I crossed the line on that one. My bad.
Truly. Yeah. But are things okay over there, Stretch? Are you doing all right?
I mean, I'm doing fine. There's a whole bunch of real worse places in Florida. I saw a boat flipped over next to beach volleyball nets, so that was wild. But aside from that, I'm safe.
That's good.
He made it.
He did. This week we are going to talk about Ubisoft. Kind of a big tell-all. It's been a rough past week for Ubisoft. Well, kind of a rough past couple
few years,
yeah. But this is hot off the heels of I guess the big linchpin is the delay of Assassin's Creed Shadows, which is going from November to February 14. Which I just want to remind everyone is the same month that we're going to see Civilization 7 and Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 and Monster Hunter Wilds. So it's
a crazy month.
It's interesting. Yeah. And the fucking the Yakuza, the pirate Yakuza. Actually, can we talk about that instead? Whole.
They're the best developers in the world.
They really are
serious in the world.
Like I love we'll get back to Ubisoft in a second. I love that there is that tweet that someone was like, apparently this pirate Yakuza game was leaked 6 months ago on 4chan, but it was so weird that everyone was like, this cannot be a real leak.
It's fake.
It makes me think of that scene from Community. I don't know if you guys have watched the show, but where they put bags over heads and like steal away some students to take them to like a secret enclave meeting for the AC repair school. And it's like, we want to make sure that when you're here, even if you tell anyone, they won't believe you. That's why we have a spaceman over there and we have like a black Hitler making paninis. Like, no one would have guessed a pirate game.
It's so weird. It's just Majima has no memory and is a pirate now. It's 10 out of 10.
And he's still wearing the same getup essentially, but just a pirate hat and that's it.
Yeah, it's so good. It's perfect.
I hope that the game starts with the kind of logic of like, well, I have an eye patch and the only people who wear eye patches are pirates. So I must be like
he walks.
There's no way I can be anything but a pirate.
One costume store that's got a pirate costume. He's like, is that me?
He does the thing like in the movies where like a character walks by like the display in the window and looks and like their head perfectly lines up with the outfit and they're like,
only thing missing is the hat. That'd be good. But one of the interesting things, I wish I could, I should try to find the interview real quick now that we're talking about it. Did you see that one where they were talking to the studio RGG, where they were talking to them about making games and how there's so many people, they're like, we don't understand why other developers like start from scratch. They treat it like TV in terms of using the new setting, but for new stories. Mm-hmm. I was like, that's actually a really good analogy and a very good point. About why they're able to produce so much stuff that is high quality. It's not crap at all.
Yeah, and even if they are reusing the maps, like if you've played a bunch of the like, especially if they're in the same engine, like the Dragon engine, right? Like you've seen these maps before, but they still have like updates. They still look a little bit new, a little fresh, right? Like
there's new stuff going on.
Yeah, it's not like a carbon copy 1-to-1. It's just familiar, not.
It's a good point though. Like it works for their series, and like I think it's a fittingly a good juxtaposition to Ubisoft that we're going to be talking about in a little bit.
I mean, that also like it so easily locks into fans' nostalgia as well. Like you might have like literally just finished one Yakuza game and you boot up a second, you can be like, I beat someone over the head with that sign as a different character. Like, immediate buy-in.
That kind of stuff, like, or just like easily, I know how to get around the map. Like I know exactly where certain things are always.
Yep.
And they open new shops, so like, oh, it's over by the old whatever thing.
Yeah.
Like, and it just made me start thinking too, like for other settings, like how great would it be? Like one of the first big cities things that I remember being like kind of blown away by was Novigrad and Witcher 3. I can imagine keep coming back to that as it grows over time or something in the series. Or like another PR thing with like Night City. Imagine they kept fleshing that out, because if it's a cool, visually cool setting, but imagine if they just kept giving you more and more things to do in it.
Yeah.
Over time.
The closest thing I can think of to that is kind of Grand Theft Auto, because like they use some of the same cities across the series, but there's so much generational gap between each one that it's still it's kind of familiar, but
it's
very
I mean, we've just had Tears of the Kingdom that did just that. Like they added all of the depths, which is just an inverse of the height map of the regular world, but you go to like Tarrytown, that a major quest in Breath of the Wild was like, I'm going to keep throwing rupees at this town so that they can get built up. And you come back and they've got like industry and prefab housing and stuff.
Yeah.
You can see the passage of time as you re-explore and find those nostalgic places.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's definitely ways to do that right.
For sure. So February 2024, you're going to have 3 open world games coming out, right? You're going to have Yakuza Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza, is that the full title? Anyway, that one. That you're gonna have Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, and now Assassin's Creed Shadows, right? And
it's Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii.
Obviously,
even better.
I mean, it is what it is on the tin, right? Like, yeah. So yeah, you've got all that. You've got Civilization 7 coming out. You've got Monster Hunter Wilds. Like there's a lot going on there, right? And Ubisoft has decided to delay Assassin's Creed 2 that month to add polish, but also in direct response to Star Wars Outlaws' kind of lukewarm sales reception. Apparently it did not do as well as they would like. And I mean, you would think, right? Star Wars has a lot of fans somehow, and it would do well. And it
but Uplay has more haters.
Yeah, so they're fast tracking the Steam release. So Outlaws is coming out on Steam in November, and they're also kind of treating it like a roadmap. Like here's the real launch day, kind of, which is also weird. And Assassin's Creed Shadows is going to release day 1 on Steam as well. And they've refunded all pre-orders, and I think you get like the first wave of the season pass included
the first
now.
DLC, the first big DLC for free or something. Like that.
Yeah. So they're really kind of overhauling how they're approaching the releases, and they're very much taking some careful consideration into what state they want Shadows to launch in.
Well, I mean, Assassin's Creed's their big thing. That's it. So they kind of have to, right?
Yeah.
There's definitely, like, normally if a game is delayed due to like production or whatever, it's all like, the discussion is all within one company. The fact that they are moving up a previously timed exclusive release on one platform to go to another, and then are opting to not go for it or have like swapped out of that deal, means that there is probably a contract that Ubisoft has bought out of, that they are saying we are going to suffer more monetary damages by not simultaneously releasing than it would cost to get out of this 6-month, 12-month exclusivity period. And that speaks so loudly to the state of the launches and the discussion that has been going on about, like, there's already more than enough games to be playing, so why would I purchase on a storefront that I don't want to purchase on when I know it's going to come to the storefront that I use later?
Yeah.
And I'm sure that like the Steam Deck has exacerbated that as well, because I don't know how compatible it is, but if you have a Steam Deck, I assume that you're just like really wanting to launch everything in the one spot.
Yeah. Or at least it's an option to have, right? Like there may be some people who do both, like on desktop gaming and then Steam Deck gaming. but
Yeah.
the fact that that option's taken away when you do it on Uplay is probably a factor, right? Yeah.
I think this is it's interesting that a internal memo from Yves got put out. Did you guys see that?
Yeah.
Of him kind of talking through the process of how that's where made a lot of headlines where they said, Outlaws was kind of lukewarm, didn't quite meet what they wanted, didn't quite review like they wanted. And he kind of just lays out like, yeah, we've been so used to essentially bug fixing and doing that kind of stuff in the first few months post-launch, but we don't want to do that with Shadows. So like, I mean, we knew they know that they do this, but it's very interesting to see it so frankly put
right
by someone. And that's what they're trying to avoid with Shadows is that bug fixing and whatnot. They can try to do that beforehand. What novel concept, I know.
It's innovation.
They're innovating in the AAA space.
Yes. Not the quadruple A space, though.
No.
Well, because that's kind of the thing, right? When you look at Ubisoft's previous track record before Outlaws, right? Like we're looking at Skull and Bones, the first quadruple A game.
That's right.
Everyone's playing it still. And then before that,
or is it early access?
I thought it came out, right?
I don't know. I don't really care, but
yeah,
I'm pretty sure it's out.
Yeah. Okay. That game that was in development hell for like 10 years.
Forever.
Yeah. And then before
Skull and Bones
that,
released.
Oh,
yeah. And then before that was Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora. Far Cry, but you're a big blue Na'vi.
That's right.
Also pretty lukewarm for another like huge franchise, mainstream, well-known IP, right?
Yeah.
And then I think before that was Assassin's Creed Mirage. They're like back to our basics, return to our roots, the turning point of our company. Let's get back into the old school Assassin's Creed style. And even that, I don't remember that being like, I remember it being received fine.
It was okay. It was definitely just a smaller game for them.
Yep.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was really nice to be back in like a manageably sized Assassin's Creed game. The fact that it was even probably like smaller than like 2 and Brotherhood and Revelations, like before absolutely feature bloat got them.
Yeah.
It was really nice, but I think that there's a certain level of trust in the Assassin's Creed franchise that a lot of people don't have.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I don't know. Like you're going through the list of games. Like there's been so much said about. I mean, we've been joking about the Ubisoft formula. I think the one big article way back in the day they made fun of was that one about Watch Dogs, like talking about how they're all the same.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about this forever, and like what's funny, it's kind of true in terms of a checklist of certain mechanics they have in their game of expanding the map and points of interest and the way they handle side quests and whatnot. Is all pretty similar. So it's interesting that like they see Outlaws. I'm like, it didn't do as well as we had hoped. Just hoping that the Star Wars paint would make it better, essentially. Yeah. But I mean, it's like they keep serving us rice and beans and be like, why don't they like the rice and beans anymore? It's like rice and beans are good, but not that's all I'm eating.
Like, hey, we've got something new for you guys. It's beans and rice. Enjoy.
This time it's black beans, and we put a little Cajun seasoning in it. And you're like, oh, spicy. Interesting.
Yeah. And when I think back to it's like, it's not only the formula that I like, the formula is pretty stale. I don't think we need to tell the audience that. Like, I'm sure what a Ubisoft formula is. But I think even beyond that, I've found for me personally, the writing in these Ubisoft games are very middling at best. I played like 40 hours of Odyssey, and I loved this thing that stood out to me the most was the setting and Cassandra being sassy, but I don't remember who or what or why she was being sassy, like who she was doing it to or whatever. I don't remember any of that because like it was very meh.
I think the setups are cool. They usually have good setups, I think, and the overarching plot idea is good. But I would agree with you that moment to moment like stuff is like,
yeah. And like Outlaws, I've decided I'm kind of done with it. I got to Tatooine and did the main quest there, and I'm like, okay, I'm kind of done here because none of these characters are striking interest to me. I know when we had Erin on our podcast a while back, she reviewed it. She loved the game, so definitely different tastes, right? Sure. But I've just found in general the writing to be very lukewarm,
A lot of the issues that I have with the writing in Ubisoft games, I feels like it's like they're trying to hit a word count, and I think that damages the story of a game a lot more than it ever helps. That, you know, if you delivered the exact same amount of story in 5 hours instead of trying to stretch it to 10 or 15.
Yeah. Well, it makes you,
You
like, I
know,
wonder how big these. I would be interesting looking at these credits too, to, like, how big are these writing teams in a way? Because like I'm thinking
just
too,
gets lost.
in my head, I was like, oh, I just Baldur's Gate 3, they had like a writing team that was like 20 people or so, and that has a shit ton of writing, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's always extremely high quality. Just about every corner of it is great. So I wonder if part of it is that investment. It's kind of like the writing team is like the IT department at most companies. We're like, we got like 1 or 2 guys in there.
Yeah.
They'll figure it out. Like, they'll do it. We'll get it done. Because we don't really have any of those like rock star writer kind of people that people would follow around. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even like you think of people that write like screenplays for like movies, like there's certain well-known writers like, oh shit, they just wrote a thing that might be interesting, and they usually go on to be directors of their own shit and stuff.
Yeah.
But we don't have a lot of that. Like some of the few people I can think of don't do it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
The names that I know.
Yeah, and I think too, it's just the way it's also packaged for me. Like I found the acting is usually like, it's all right, or kind of, you know, just phoning it in, sort of, especially for like the NPCs, like the side characters, right? And like the camera angles still feel like Mass Effect 2, you know. that is really, it's so noticeable, you know. And I don't know, it just overall kind of just doesn't spark interest in me. And I think that's why with Shadows, I know we've all talked about how we're like, oh, maybe that could be interesting, and mainly it's because it's Assassin's Creed in Japan. You know, like
basically what everybody said they wanted for.
Honestly, it's insane that it took them this long to release one. Like, we got China and Russia before we got Japan.
Yeah. And just to add more like overall context to this Ubisoft thing, there has been calls for strikes internally. That is also happening. And I think some investors, like, what is it, the AJ Investments or something along those lines, has asked for them to like sell off the game, the studio, like ask Yves Guillemot to like sell off their shares, so that way it can be like privately owned instead of publicly owned. But
yeah,
I mean, famously, Guillemot has like refused to do that. So we'll see what happens there.
I don't know. It would be nice if they would try to new stuff. Like what sucks too is that there's a little bit of a dichotomy with Ubisoft, and that they have put out some smaller stuff that has been interesting, like the Prince of Persia, Lost Crown stuff, and the Prince of Persia Rogue.
The Rogue
stuff.
Prince of Persia.
The Rogue Prince of Persia.
Though that was developed by Motion Twin, right?
Sure, but I mean it's Ubisoft
their IP,
and whatnot. But so they are willing to do that kind of stuff. Just like, man, do more of those things. I would hope is what they've learned, instead of, you know, spending so much money on these extremely high budget things. Yeah. It's one of the things that, like, I think people don't realize with Ubisoft is how big they are in terms of development teams and developers they have on their payroll. It's like, take all of the Sony first party studios combined, and you haven't touched Ubisoft yet in terms of just sheer number of people working for them. So like it's huge.
They have studios literally all over the world.
I think it's easy for people to forget that for some reason. I don't know why. Because they're just not one of the console makers, but it's like console makers Ubisoft. Like, that's it.
I mean, it's also like there's less notoriety there because the stuff that they put out normally isn't like really on the radar in the same way that other people's stuff is. Like, we know that the other thing that they're working on is the Prince of Persia remake that is also currently in development hell.
And Beyond Good and Evil
after the very lukewarm announcement with a very questionable looking trailer.
Yeah.
You didn't like the erection of the candle?
Surprisingly, no.
Candle erection? No, but I guess...
some of the other things too, right? There's the Crew Motorfest. Totally forgot about that. And then they always have a Just Dance every year, but I mean,
there's a certain group that is excited for that. That's the reason I did it. So
If people got to understand the new lore. Will the prince end up turning against his evil mother when she kidnaps the Katy Perry girl?
I don't know what you're talking about.
I got caught I got caught in like a TikTok loop of one of the dancers that does the dances for the games. Fun fact, they actually go and like paint them white. That's not like post-production. That's legit like a day of putting on that. But she had a series of TikToks where she was going through all of the story of the different games. It's surprisingly deep.
Okay, what is with Ubisoft adding weird meta overarching, like Assassin's Creed does the same thing. Remember all the like the Desmond shit and like
and Abstergo,
yeah.
I mean, they just weirdly dropped that. I still don't get. That's wild.
Like they dropped it but didn't. They still reference it in, at least in like Odyssey. I remember they did. I think they do.
Yeah, that's true.
In Valhalla.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they find Desmond because he's inside the computer.
I'm sorry. Did they Kingdom Hearts recode this shit?
Yeah, I think at the end of it might have been Valhalla. At the end of Valhalla, the main character like seals themselves into the Animus, and they find like a human that's just like glowing white with like
weird shit
plans in front of him and stuff, and like that's the the bleed of Desmond stuck inside the machine orchestrating the thingos.
That's way more interesting than anything else you've been putting out. Lead into it.
But that's the thing. It has that Kingdom Hearts flavor, but I don't care enough to learn it the same way I know the Kingdom Hearts.
Do you know the Kingdom Hearts though? To be honest with yourself,
I kind of do. Yeah.
No. X's are names, and some dudes.
One day we'll do a pod dissect it. When Kingdom Hearts 4 has a release date, we'll do a pod just catching up on all of Kingdom Hearts.
30 hours long.
Yeah.
One thing I just hit me that I would need to go look at some of their announcements and stuff to verify this, but my gut is feeling that with so many like Ubisoft, like they're whatever the big showcase and stuff when they're showing a thing, it's more often than not look at how much you can do, not look at how cool what you can do is so frequently. Because if you think about something like a Nintendo, it's just like, hey, here's a cool like gameplay thing that looks rad, and you're like, oh fuck, that does look rad. I don't need to know that how much things are going on in this game. And like the Ubisoft games, like you can go to this place and it's got this much stuff, and the map is this big, and that's going on, and that kind of thing. And that's just an interesting insight into the philosophy of what they see as important that players want to see. I mean, obviously, pitting anybody against Nintendo is fucking unfair, which I understand. But they do definitely focus more on like, hey, here's some cool gameplay mechanic thing. I remember the only thing they put out for Tears of the Kingdom was like, here's this 10-minute thing about, combining weapons.
Yeah.
Peace. Yeah. We're out. And I was like, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, they just had one video about the Omni hand, right? Like that was it. Just like, look, you can move shit around.
All in one. They showed Ultran for a second and then putting stuff together, and they're like, all right, bye.
Yep.
The fact that they showed nothing about the depths at all, that was just like, you found that out when you started the game, was unfucking real. Like the entirety of the marketing was world Ubisoft. And overworld and bonkers.
Ubisoft would have spent like multiple dev diaries about it, telling you about it.
But yeah, so Ubisoft's kind of in just like a rough state right now in general. I think their stocks are pretty low.
Yeah, I think they took a 20% hit when they announced the Assassin's Creed delay or something like that.
Yeah. And I think it's a mix of a lot of different factors, right? I think probably the biggest thing is that, like we were saying earlier, we don't need to tell you about the Ubisoft formula because you probably know they're probably kind of reaping those rewards. You know what I mean? Like that's the narrative they have created for themselves, and it's permeated enough and for long enough that most people recognize it,
Yeah, what's nice about that is like if early on, it's when that, because like I said, this idea of how they make their games has been around for like well over a decade now. that's not a bad thing to have necessarily if you're adding onto it and changing it. So like what the idea of that open world stuff meant, like changed slowly over time. They kept adding, and this is what it means. We do this also too, and we revamped this kind of thing or whatever. That would be a different story. But in terms of like the nuts and bolts of the game design, and particularly when they approach open world, Watch Dogs 2 today is kind of the same, exactly, just about, except I guess there's less focus on. They do the radio towers a little differently, slightly, but they're still pretty much the same. Like there's so much that's identical with just a new coat of paint. That's where I think the fumble is, because I think having the identity of like this, what you're gonna get when you get our games, and obviously people generally seem to like it because they still sell well and they know what they're getting.
Yeah, I mean, like
they just really need to make some changes.
Yeah, because like say what you will about Call of Duty, it's McDonald's, right? It's like it's not the healthiest thing, but you know what you want, and when you're in the mood for exactly that, you know where to get it.
Still one of the top selling games every year.
Exactly.
It also probably doesn't help that a lot of companies did kind of ape their style, and we ended up getting a whole bunch of other very Ubisoft. I mean, like Horizon Zero Dawn. Mm-hmm. That's an Ubisoft ass fucking game. You climb up the giraffes to activate the sensor tower. But they added a better story, put it in an extremely unique setting. Like they did more to change it up. It's kind of, Ubisoft has become like the Citizen Kane, kind of like what they did at the start of it was very like groundbreaking, unique, whatever. But when so many other people have done it and done it better, and they're just here remaking Citizen Kane, they release Citizen Kane 20 and people say, we've seen it all before in these games that did it better. They're not just competing against themselves, it's other people are doing it better as well.
Yeah, well, there's certain ways that you can get over it, like the crutches of it. Like a lot of games use their formula, but they like bring up Ubisoft writing. Like if you really think about something like Witcher 3, it is an Ubisoft structured game essentially. They just have such incredible writing and quest design that it just takes it over the top. Like it's amazing. I think even when I wrote my review for it, I said something about it being like, all right, now we've seen what the top of an open world can be. Let's see what we can do next. Yep. Like how can we move on from this? That was back then.
Which is so ironic too, because I feel like The Witcher was like a prototype for what the current Assassin's Creed games are like Origins and Odyssey and Valhalla, right? Not that they're like literally directly connected, but it definitely looks like Ubisoft saw that and was like, we can do that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And hey, like we're not shaming anyone for like taking looks at other people's games and thinking what works well, what would work for us, and like building on that. That's the healthiest thing to do. You should, like, no game company should be reinventing the wheel every single fucking time. But if you do it and do it and do it again, but you're not adding, then that's where the problem lies.
Add something, change something.
Yeah. I mean, like on a personal note, I do hope that Assassin's Creed Shadows does well. Right? I mean, like it like I've said with other Assassin's Creeds of that style, like the best part is the setting, and it would be very cool to see them realize Japan in that way, in the way they do, right? Because they definitely put in the work for the world design of anything else, right? So I hope that
I'd say they're kind of the top of the world doing it. Top dev team at making like those super detailed like thing with the Discovery Tour and stuff. Like they're kind of it.
Yeah, currently they're the number one producer of edutainment games.
In a way, in a sense, it's not untrue. But like their art team and their development team for like just design is incredible for the open world. Like a look of it, they always nail it every time.
Yeah, agreed.
It was like even Avatar was crazy cool looking.
Yeah, I guess when I think about it though too, it's like somehow the set dressing looks very good, but the world can also feel a little bit empty.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is coming from like how there's kind of a lack of reactivity to the world, right? Like Cyberpunk, you run around in Night City for like a minute and at least like 3 people bother you with a quest or something. You know what I mean? There's like something going on always. Yeah, and I don't feel like I run into it that as much with.
Yes, I would
Assassin's
agree
Creed
with you there.
games.
Where
Yeah.
it's definitely more like I'm walking on a movie set instead of participating in a world in a way. Like very well done. It's beautiful. It's cool looking. It's great, but it's not a super lived in feeling thing that I can do stuff with.
Yeah.
Small worlds where you like trip over something interesting every 5 feet will always be my go-to versus a world like GTA 5 where it's like, well, drive for 20 minutes, absolutely nothing will fucking happen, and then you get to a quest.
I think you're using the wrong game there, because there is so much stuff in between that 20 minutes that you're just driving by.
Yeah.
Like they're the ones that, in terms of, you're talking about a big map, doing it right, Rockstar kind of is the one.
I mean, they've got like shops and stuff, but it's not like there's quests. There's as many like unique things to interact with.
I think there are like a lot of strangers
I
around.
mean,
like, I think in
there's a lot
GTA
of weird
5,
stuff you can come
there's
across.
there's like people who try to find Bigfoot and shit like that. Like
There's quite a bit going on in that map. Like it's impressive.
Well, I missed it then.
Because like the other one, my next example is going to be Red Dead 2, which has got insane stuff going on everywhere, like all the time. And like Saint Denis, like that feels like a real town. Like people are going about doing stuff. There's tons of interactable NPCs, all kinds of stuff that you can do.
interact with literally every NPC.
That's true.
You can stick them up or say hello.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that gets to like the shallowness of the experience. Like, yeah, I could, you can interact with everything. I could say that you could interact with everything in Dead Rising or in Crackdown. But like, if the interaction is like punching them, then that's not like, I wouldn't really think of that as an interaction.
No, I agree. I think that is base level, but there's more going on that you could do. That's just, you could do all that stuff, but there's more that you also could explore there too. There's so much stuff in Rockstar games that they don't telegraph that just like will reward curiosity. Like so many little quests that don't come up as proper quests. You just get to find out what happens if you follow the thread. Like you won't get a notification like, hey, you found the thing. It's just like, oh my God, that was fucked up. Like I just came across this serial killer body. Somebody just got murdered. And like just certain things, like there's all kinds of little things all around. That's why I say in terms of like the really big open world, it's Rockstar's like obviously top of the heap in terms of interactivity. Yeah. But I do think you're right in terms of so many of these big open worlds are just a vast nothingness of padding your time of traveling in between it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a bummer.
Mm-hmm.
Did you guys work on that quick travel?
Yeah.
I'm so tired of open world stuff.
Yeah. Because like even with Shadows, it's like I'm kind of excited for it, but I also don't know if I'll finish it, especially if it's like Odyssey, where it's like over 100 hours or something. It's like it's a lot, but I don't know. It's interesting times for Ubisoft for sure. I think there's a lot riding on their big Assassin's Creed game in Japan, and if that also doesn't do well, I think we potentially might see even more drastic news.
But I'm expecting Shadows will probably do pretty well, most likely.
I think so, maybe. I mean, like I said earlier, it's a very competitive month. A lot of things vying for your attention, and then we're at that point now where games are a financial investment, but they're also more of a time investment, right? Yeah. Like you only have so many hours in a day, and like not to mention Sony is kind of also eating their lunch with Ghost of Tsushima, Ghost of Yotei.
Yeah.
Also being Assassin's Creed in Japan, kind of. They just confirmed their sequel to Ghost of Tsushima at a state of play, and I mean, looks pretty cool.
Looks pretty rad.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see. I don't know, but like part of it too is like I know I would be curious how well Ubisoft games sold in Japan, like generally so far, and like how much they're hoping that because this is set in Japan, it might spark some more interest in their games. if that's part of what they think. Because the Japanese Microsoft's humongous for games. They buy so many games.
I mean, we talked about how, people have been clamoring to get an Assassin's Creed game in Japan for so long. Yeah. It might have kind of been that they were looking at, the writing on the wall and were like, well, we really need to pull out something big. Let's finally do the one in Japan.
Well, I mean, we got to remember too, like these decisions were made probably 6 years ago, 7 years ago.
Yeah. I didn't just pull it out of the closet.
Yeah.
No, but even then, as we've been sitting here saying that for how long Ubisoft has been stagnant with the formula, even that decision 6 years ago could have very easily been anticipating where they are now.
Yeah,
that's true. Well, we will see where they go from here. But we can hop over to something else here. I think, Stretch, you've been playing a lot of a new Zelda game starring Link for the first time.
Link is finally the star.
That's how I have started my review of finally a game where we get to play as Zelda. No, the CDI ones do not count. Finally getting Echoes of Wisdom. They have somehow managed to mash together the 2D elements of a classic Zelda game with a whole bunch of Tears of the Kingdom freedom and mechanics in a really cool way.
Yeah.
I think at the start I was pretty overwhelmed with a lot of the choices that you were given.
Yeah.
But then you kind of get to figure out how samey a lot of them are. Like there are definitely a few, like there's a catalog of echoes that, will be your go-to as you go through the game. But it's really fun. It's a fun, small adventure where, it has that, smaller map, but you're tripping over something wherever you go. That does a really good job of putting the player on the line between this point and this point, where they will see a strange house. They'll visit a nostalgic ruin because it is somewhat built in the world of Link to the Past, which means I think that this is the Zelda game that has had the most same worlds then. If it had Link to the Past, Link Between Worlds, and now Echoes of Wisdom.
Yeah.
I think so.
But yeah, I just did some wandering and I ended up at the doorway to the Eastern Palace from Link to the Past, which is like the first dungeon that you go into. And there's like a unique mini boss that is totally off the beaten trail, but is like some fun side quest thing. It's like, cool. I dig that. Like that is fully building into nostalgia.
Yeah. So it's the kind of game, right, where it's like you spawn in these echoes, because it originally started as like they were trying to make Mario Maker for Zelda, right? That they revealed that in like an interview this week, and then decided to pivot it a little and kind of turn it into like Zelda can spawn in almost anything to solve puzzles and fight enemies. Is that kind of right?
Yeah. There are certain things that like. Every enemy you defeat, the first time you defeat them, they'll drop an echo, so you can pick that up. And then there are certain elements of the world that you can also pick up and take with you. But then you also end up with like nicer bed, and Zelda's royal bed. A lot of the things, or like you have giant pot from a dungeon, giant pot from Hyrule Castle. And so you do like get a whole bunch of duplicates. There are some mechanical differences to the bed, because you can actually spawn the bed in wherever and then rest in it to regain hearts.
That's pretty rad.
And the better the bed, the more points it costs to summon, but it heals you faster. And so as you level up, as you defeat dungeons, either the amount of points you have to summon increases, or at certain points when you like level up Zelda's little friend, certain summons will become cheaper to create. So you're not going to end up with like 30 points that you can
That's what I
spend
was
to
about to
summon.
ask. How long does this trail get? Because you got little triangles that float behind them that are your points.
Yeah. I think that they did a really smart job by, having sometimes you gain an extra triangle, and sometimes just the things that you summon get cheaper, because that kind of, it still gives you a reward, but it doesn't make you feel too busted too quickly. That being said, it is so easy to break the game open.
Oh yeah.
Which is really good and really bad. For the water temple, when you start the game, you do one kind of mini dungeon thing, and then you get an option to go to 2. In the water dungeon, if you know where you're going, the mechanic of the water dungeon is that you need to hit 5 switches so that you can raise a water level so that you can get to where the boss door is. But you can also spawn in a spider, master hand it, and then you can do a button so that Zelda moves with the thing that she's attached to. So as you need to raise this water level, you can spawn the spider, pointed at the wall, attached to it, and let it carry you up. Then you can go to the door that gives you, pretty much immediate access to the boss key, go back to the central chamber, spawn the spider again, and then just make your way up to the boss. So instead of going around to 20 rooms and flipping 5 switches, you just go down one side passage, pick up the boss key, and go straight to the end.
Yeah. So does that feel like breaking the game, or do you feel like I'm so clever, I figured out a pro strat?
Look how smart I am.
I mean, yeah, I guess in terms of they're probably, putting everything in, it's impossible when you can spawn all of these things. It's impossible to create a situation where you are going to be, be perfectly funneled to only be able to do things a certain way. The downside of having that much freedom, though, is that there was another dungeon that I was doing later that it was also a large castle with 6 different entrance points, and I totally got lost because I was I was looking at the 5 floors in the dungeon map and the different entrances and exits outside, and the way that I went in and went out, and I'm I don't know what regular progression looks like to know if I have made myself, if I've ended up here, should I be going this way? Is that backtracking? Is that forward tracking?
The sequence broke too hard.
Yeah, so because it got so broken, it was I don't know where forward is anymore.
That's tricky. I feel like Nintendo, I guess I'm thinking of Mario specifically, they make things where it's they know you think you can break the game by getting up to that platform or something that you're not supposed to get up on. But then when you get up there are coins. It's they knew, you can probably make it up here, that kind of thing. So I was curious if they kind of did the same thing with this game, but it seems like it's kind of a hit or miss in that regard.
Yeah, there's definitely, in the overworld, there's definitely places that it's if you find some weird ledge, there'll be a collectible stamp or a chest with some rupees or some smoothie ingredients and stuff. None of the rewards feel that big or that interesting. So it's not in Tears of the Kingdom where you go out of your way to hunt down something, to do some weird side quest tangent, find an interesting building, and you get a piece of armor from Majora's Mask or something. The rewards are definitely not as interesting, but it's also so much smaller. That detour that you took that got you 10 more berries probably took you 30 seconds, and then because you can just stack beds on top of each other and then end up on top of the trees and wander off, there's just no holding you back.
Yeah.
And I saw they even showed us, when I did my preview, they showed us some crab enemy that you could attach yourself to, and it could just walk up any wall and crawl up onto the tree, and you can go immediately anywhere.
Yeah, just absolutely.
Yeah.
Speedruns for this game are probably already wild. I haven't taken a look yet because I'm very close to the end, But yeah, when you can build beds, like one of the echoes that you get very early on is the tiles that like float up and then home towards Link in like Ocarina of Time and stuff. You can get an echo of one of those. So in the dungeon that I'm currently in, where there's like a whole bunch of really tight platforming and moving around that you need to do to get past like lava platforms, I can just like build up beds to stack high, point towards where I want to go, summon a flying platform, hop on it, and it just shoots me across. So it's also like I'm just skipping whole rooms because of the way that you can summon things. Like there's definitely that flying platform is going to be, assuming that there isn't just some glitch to completely get out of bounds and like clip through walls and stuff, that flying platform is going to be the speediest way to break a lot of the intended route of this game.
I can see that. So this is like, is it the second to last first party Nintendo game we're aware of for the Switch? Because there's also that Mario Party Jamboree.
We've got Mario Party, we've got Mario and Luigi, we've got Donkey Kong.
Yeah, but Donkey Kong is kind of
it's like a remake, right? Or like a remaster.
Yeah. And then technically we have the Pokemon Legends game and also Metroid Prime, I guess.
But do you know those are Switch games?
Well, that's a great idea. That's a great thought. That's a very good thought.
We do know that. I think Metroid Prime might be a launch title for Switch too.
Yeah.
Obviously, the whatever announcement's coming for that is imminent. It's happening.
Yeah. I mean, they've said it's going to come by April 2025, right?
So,
like,
because it was the fall before the Switch was announced. Then it came out in March, so it was something like the announcement stream was September, October, November, something like that.
Yeah, wasn't it around that time where they did like one of those 6-hour Nintendo Treehouse things or whatever, and they just played like 6 hours of Zelda on stream or something like that?
I don't know. I just remember that's where we all saw that first Switch trailer where they're playing the fucking thing on the rooftops.
Oh yeah. And I hope they do that.
Yeah,
again.
I mean,
yes, but now it's like somewhere crazier. It's Tom Cruise on the side.
I'm kind of expecting that if Metroid Prime and if Legends are launch titles, I have a feeling that there'll be split generation. Like there will be an inferior version on the Switch.
Yeah.
I would love to think that Nintendo would have the capacity to like say, buy it. And then if you play it on your account on the new Switch, you get the new version, and the old Switch, you get the old version.
You silly
but
man.
It's going to be like, no, you're going to have to
buy a whole new game.
Yeah.
Buy a whole new game. None of your
Switch
purchases will transfer over.
To the Kingdom. Buy the Switch 2 version.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Breath of the Wild, right? That came out on Wii U, if y'all remember, but that didn't have like a cross purchase thing or whatever.
Yes, it'll be our first one in a minute where we haven't had a dual Zelda launch coming at the same, in the two generations, the new one and the old one, like Twilight Princess, Breath of the Wild.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, they both did that.
I mean, if this is where they do a branch like Wind Waker for Switch and Switch 2.
The next big thing is going to be Mario. It's whatever the next 3D Mario. That's going to be the big thing.
True.
For sure. Because it's been 8 years or 7 years since Odyssey.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're due.
Hey, I'm just fingers crossed for Sunshine 2.
Dude, that'd be great. Sunshine gets too much flack. Yeah. It's so unique, such a cool idea. Like, why would they let's give him a jetpack and water thing? It's like, who smoked a lot of stuff to get this idea? You think
the people at Nintendo smoke anything? I think that's just their genuine intuition.
I guess who is it that's like, yeah, let's make a whole game around it, not like this is a level with these weird mechanics. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what's crazy to me.
Yeah. But yeah, I know it's just kind of hitting me like while we were talking about Zelda. It's like, wow, yeah, we were very much on the tail end of the Switch, and I know the rumors for the past like 4 years have made it feel like we've been on the tail end of the Switch for many years. But we're genuinely,
we're definitely
I think, for sure for now. So
kind of like what they did with the 3DS. I think Switch support's going to go on for quite a while before, well after whatever this new one's called that comes out.
Yeah, like I could honestly see in the future, like Switch 2 or whatever they're gonna call that, being the main, like the quote unquote main console, but maybe they ramp up support for like the Switch Lite or whatever, and that's kind of like their handheld,
Maybe, I don't know. I mean, if those leaks are true of what the Switch 2 just looks like a bigger Switch, essentially, more or less.
Just call it the Switch Deck.
The Switch U.
Switch U.
But I mean, that's also if those renders are true, that's good to know, because that kind of continues to push the idea that it will be this like hybrid TV handheld thing. And it also gives more precedence to like backwards compatibility because the form factor is the same.
That's true.
Which like Nintendo's like always been really good at.
Well, I'm just like thinking, when you went from like the Wii U gamepad, it's like, well, if you want to emulate any of this functionality, you're going to need the gamepad, which you just can't do.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know. It's kind of interesting, kind of feeling like we're close to the end of a Nintendo generation here and seeing what they'll do next. Because like all these games that are coming up, besides like the ones that are far out there, like Prime 4 and what was the other? Legends, yes. Those feel big. Those feel like the kind of games where you worry, like, how well are they going to really run on the Switch?
I reckon Legends will run better because they're setting it in a city. Like that just seems smarter to have it be, the smaller scale.
Instead of like the big open zones or whatever they called them.
That like really showed the weakness of, and like, Echoes of Wisdom has frame drops and stuttering at times. And it's like a cutesy, very small top down, like it's very impressive that this game is having so many issues running.
Yeah. At least with like Brothership, that's going to be like a Mario RPG. So at least like, even if there are stutters or whatever, that's
we're not the people fans of the series will be used to it, because there's some 3DS ones where they went ham, dude, with how much stuff they had going on the screen. Like you'd be like 15 FPS, and then we're back to it had a lot going on. Like there's like you had in one of them was a Dream Team, you had a tornado of Luigi, so you'd have like 100 Luigis on your screen.
What?
And you'd make a big giant ball of squished together Luigis and stuff.
Amazing.
So it would slow your screen down. I'm definitely used to that. One thing that hit me that's interesting to think about is this will be the first major console released for Nintendo without like significant influence from Iwata. Because Iwata died a couple years before the Switch came out, but obviously Switch well into development by that time. So it'd be interesting to see that, because I mean, obviously, under a lot of what he was doing and people before him, obviously, he was not the sole guy in charge forever, but he had a lot of influence on doing weird, cool, experimental shit that sometimes didn't work out, like the Wii U.
Yeah.
So, because like part of me is like a little sad that the Switch 2 is just a bigger version of the Switch. It's like, oh, you know what I mean? Like, because they always do something weird. None in a row have ever looked the same, unless it's like, a new, like the Game Boy Color Pocket, or you know what I mean, stuff like that.
Is it going to be like when Steve Jobs passed, and kind of a lot of the real innovation of like the iPad and stuff kind of got stagnant, and now it's just bigger iPad and Android features.
How dare you? Apple Intelligence is revolutionary and is going to change the way we all use our iPhones.
Yeah,
but that's true. We are swapping away from Games Pass as a sponsor we're actively seeking out, and we're now shifting over to Apple.
That's right. We want the Apple money. We know they got money to burn.
Yeah, they really do.
They're burning it.
That campus. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I think that is an interesting point that you make, though, that it's they're if all of the like the leaked Switch 2 things are true, right? It doesn't seem like there's going to be a lot of innovation in terms of the way that Nintendo has innovated its hardware before. But I also think it's kind of a mix of like, for one, I think once they land on a handheld, like you said, they stick with that idea for a while. Like the DS, there's like 50,000 DS iterations out there, but they all kind of work the same until the 3DS, and even that is like
still the same, except it's got a little 3D switch.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's the same.
Yeah, and then now I think like with the Switch, they've kind of landed on a form function that really, really works. And also, we're kind of in a games industry that I think is a lot more risk averse. I mean, like we spent the first half of this show talking about Ubisoft, who has definitely been very risk averse, and maybe to its own detriment. But I mean, in general, right? Like these games are costing millions and millions of dollars to make. Concord costs 400 million, right? Look at that. Supposedly, yeah. But I think that it kind of makes sense for Nintendo in a way where like maybe it is worth like let's gamble the next generation at least on something that we know works, right?
Yeah, it's just, and I want to clarify, like, Iwata wasn't in charge for so much. Like the GameCube was before him. 64 obviously when he was president. He's been at the company forever because famously, he made it so Kanto could make it into Pokemon Gold and Silver. Everybody knows that story.
Yeah.
But there's just they put him out there so much of his philosophy of design and stuff. Obviously, he had a humongous influence on the way the company thought about things. I mean, Miyamoto's still a big dude around. Like, they still have a lot of creatives that are big influence. But that's kind of like, I was hoping to see just a little bit of change in the console because they have always like taken a big swing every time. Nothing looks new, but they're different and nothing's the same. I mean,
but what would you do for the Switch 2?
Like, I don't know.
Like would you put a third Joy-Con in the middle, kind of like an N64 controller? Like,
I don't know.
A little dongle in the middle.
Like it's impossible to say.
Yeah, I think the beauty of much like the leak that we talked about where someone leaked what the Yakuza game was going to be 6 months in advance. I think if you had been in the era of the GameCube and someone said, yo, look at this is the new Nintendo controller, and showed you the Wiimote, and you'd say,
what are you talking
that's
about?
fucking stupid. I think the beauty of Nintendo is that if you like ask that question again, anything that I came up with would not be outlandish enough and just exceptional enough to be the new Nintendo controller.
But what hopefully what they do is that if they've landed on this Switch is like, we like the way this is packaged and works well enough, but they can still get weird with it with stuff like even though I know it wasn't successful, it was like Nintendo Labo. Cool as shit idea. Like trying experimental stuff that would work with whatever platform they have. I hope that doesn't ever go away with them. Like, I'm totally happy. I'd be just fine if they're just making rad fucking games forever. Totally cool. But they're always thinking of weird new ways to play and interact with stuff in games that is interesting. Like, I'm bummed that Labo wasn't more of a success because it is a pretty rad idea.
Yeah.
But I hope they keep doing that kind of thing. And speaking of money to burn, they also have an insane amount of money to burn if they wanted to.
And they're doing the really smart thing of like releasing a big game and then a few really solid smaller titles. Like they are playing the game very, I don't even want to say conservative, because everything is like a wild swing for the fences. But it's like one of those things that as soon as you see the concept, you're like, oh, that's going to be successful.
Yes.
Just as much like Mario with a jetpack in Super Mario Sunshine. Mario with a cap that possesses people, incredible.
Yes.
Mario taking illicit mushrooms and tripping out, incredible.
Tripping balls.
Their big stuff is always unique and swings for the fences, but anyone will look at it and go, fuck, of course. Like, that's such a basic but wonderful factor, and they just nail that mechanic.
Yeah, that's what's so brilliant. That's why I can never not talk so positively about Nintendo, because they're so good at that. It's amazing. Like, stick to one idea and really focus on that one idea. That you don't need 10 ideas. What can that one idea really do? Because that's what Cappy is. Like, what really, if we run it into the ground as much as we can think of possibly doing, what can Cappy do? That's all it is. Such a simple idea, but obviously executed to the highest level.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. I love them.
Yeah, I think there's something about like I know it's kind of trite to say like Nintendo magic because BioWare, right? But I think there is something about Nintendo where even if they come up with something really weird and off the wall, it still finds its audience. It might not be you, but you might be one of those 12 Splatoon 3 players out there. And I love that you all exist and enjoy the game as much as you do. Right. Like I think the worst, the quote unquote worst IP I can think of that was new is maybe ARMS. Like that maybe is like the closest thing to a failure that Switch may have had in like the Switch era.
Definitely.
1-2 Switch.
Yeah. Well, well, that got a sequel.
Hey, that got a sequel, yeah.
Which is wild.
ARMS has not gotten a sequel yet.
Yeah.
But
Snipper Clips.
that was a good little indie game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, like ARMS, even that, I'm like, well, okay, it didn't find its footing, and well, because it's all ARMS, and it's like it is mainly a fighting game, competitive. Thank you, Stretch. Which is a little like one-on-one isn't really a big thing I feel like on Switch, but even the way it plays, I found was very like innovative. Like the whole like I remember seeing the direct for it, and the second that the dude like twists his fist to like curve it, I'm like, oh, that's kind of sick, actually.
Yeah. Like I said, there's always cool shit going on with them.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be what drives a lot of what they do. Is like, this is a cool idea. Let's just go with it. Not like, we need to put another product out, which obviously they are thinking of too, because they're like you were just saying, they're probably the best of any of the big makers of like having a stable release schedule that's just constantly putting out some all right stuff.
Yeah.
Like there's never, we haven't had a down Nintendo year in I can't even remember.
Not since the Wii U times,
yeah,
maybe.
It's been a long ass time. So like they've got a formula that's working for them.
Yeah.
And like you're seeing, what's crazy is that they're not just putting out the same stuff. It's like interesting, cool ideas constantly.
Yeah. Except for Pokemon.
Yeah, well, Pokemon's not made by Nintendo. It's made by Game Freak. And then there's the Pokemon Company. That's also
true.
part of it.
You not only jabbed, but you twisted with that one.
It's a real sucker punch.
Yeah, yes, you're right. Fuck Pokemon. Pokemon's the worst.
Pokemon's fine. It's okay.
Yeah, it was 20 years ago, and they've decided that that's still fine. You're right.
Yeah, I mean, hey, Heart Gold and Soul Silver are still the best Pokemon.
Yeah,
like if someone
how old
today,
are they?
like I know, but I still think like if someone were to somehow approach me today and be like, hey, I've never played a Pokemon game, which one do you recommend? I would still just say go find.
That's what I would do.
Well, probably just emulate Heart Gold and Soul Silver.
I'd say emulate, because don't go find them because they're very expensive. But
yes, but Nintendo's lawyers, if you're listening, go and purchase them from a wonderful, responsible secondhand retailer.
Well, I purchase them and then emulate them, because emulation is better and it's ethical to emulate after you purchase it. That's the right way to do it.
Yes. But I think that's a good place for us to wrap for this week's episode of the TechRaptor podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed. And if you did, feel free to leave us a review, I think. Or no, actually, no, it's comments, right? On Spotify. Comment, let us know down below. How are you feeling about Ubisoft's current woes? Are you worried, excited, indifferent? We'd love to know what you think. We'd love to just get a temperature check, right, on that. And subscribe if you haven't already, and also check out our newsletter. We do that every week. This week we just did a little bit of a bigger digest on the Assassin's Creed and Ubisoft stuff, so you can check that out if you need even more information and links to understand what's been going on. But otherwise, we will be back in your feed next week, and we will see you then. Bye-bye.